Welcome back to React Native Radio Podcast. Brought to you by the NSA. We know you have some concerns, and we want you to know we hear you. Episode 262, Maestro with Dima Zaytsev.
Hey, Mazen, do you have your kids' song stuck in your head right now?
Yes, I'm actually singing Mickey Mouse Clubhouse right now instead of prepping for this podcast.
The Mickey Mouse Club.
That's a very good, catchy song. Yeah. My Spotify is all out of whack.
Yep.
My Discover Weekly, that like recommends new songs.
It's trash. It's
all impossible.
It's all kid songs. Yeah. Don't.
I used to love it. Now no. The Google
your
actually
Spotify recommendations are totally trash once you have a kid.
Yeah, I can actually hear it right now. My wife is probably feeding him lunch and has the music going on in the background. So that's probably my Spotify right now, messing up my algorithm. So
I think Jamon's long past this stage of life. Your kids probably have their own Spotify by now.
I don't even know what song you're talking about. What song are you talking about?
Are you familiar with Mickey Mouse Clubhouse? That maybe
sort of vaguely. Yeah, it's my youngest is 9, so.
Well, there's also like Baby Shark, which he's into.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And there's actually a version of Baby Shark that's about monkeys that he loves also. So yeah, we could have a whole episode about this.
My girls are more into Taylor Swift, but then also they weirdly are into a lot of songs that came out when I was like 20.
What?
Like Backstreet Boys.
Is it coming back?
Like
I hear the 90s are coming back around. Like fashion, music, it's coming back.
Didn't NSYNC or Backstreet Boys, one of them, go like on tour or something recently?
Did they?
Maybe that's why.
I think so. I remember vaguely hearing something that one of them.
That was my first CD when I was like 10 years old.
Oh, NSYNC. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of funny because they'll just be rocking out to songs that I listen to. It's fun. But hopefully I can avoid Mickey Mouse Clubhouse.
It's catchy, Jamon. Be careful.
It's kind of a bop. I think you wouldn't mind.
Don't play it on YouTube.
I don't know. It seems like
it's a downward spot, or on Spotify.
It will get stuck in your head though, so maybe don't. Yeah.
It just gets in the algorithm and then you're done. Okay, well, should I do intros? I mean, we got to try to keep the earworms from spreading here. So I'm Jamon Holmgren, your host and friendly CTO of Infinite Red. I live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest with my wife and 4 kids. I play recreational hockey. I actually played super late last night. It was my 3rd night in a row. I started the game at 9:45 p.m. and didn't get out of there till after 11.
I can't believe you play hockey while I'm
11.
asleep. Like, how do you even have energy?
I didn't.
My team was supposed to play at 10 o'clock last night. And I told them I can't make it because 1, yes, I was asleep by then. And 2, I had to be up at 5 o'clock.
Why'd you have to be up at 5?
Because our new tenant loves to wake up at 5 o'clock screaming.
Your new tenant. Your son. Yes.
That
tenant. I'm joined by my amicable co-hosts, Robin and Mazen, and our guest, Dima, who I will introduce in just a second. Robin is our lead software engineer at Infinite Red. Robin recently got promoted. Congrats, Robin. She's located west of Portland, Oregon with her husband and 2 kids and has specialized in React Native for the past 6 years. Mazen lives in Durham, North Carolina with his wife and new tenant. He's a former pro soccer player and coach and is a senior React Native engineer also here at Infinite Red. And we also have Dima Zaytsev. He's a lead engineer at mobile.dev. He lives in Amsterdam and he kind of comes from a background of Android development. He, for example, created Photo Apparat, which is a camera library for Android, kind of a popular one. But says he does all kinds of things these days. So we're going to be diving into some of that stuff as we get into it. Welcome to the podcast, Dima.
Hello. Thank you for having me here.
Awesome. Can't wait to get into it. But I do have to mention that this episode is sponsored by Chain React. America's best React Native conference is back. It's happening May 17th through 19th in Portland, Oregon. We have workshops. We have lightning talks. We have some great speakers and some great talks. We're going to be going through all the CFP stuff. I think it'll be closed by the time this comes out. Sorry if you didn't get your talk submitted. I did tweet about it like 45 times. But it's going to be an awesome conference. And I've seen some of the talks that have been submitted, and they are absolutely fantastic. You're not going to get this content at other conferences. This is like, a lot of conferences are like React conferences that sort of bolt on React Native. This is all React Native, 100% React Native.
First class.
All right, let's get into our topic. We're going to be talking about Maestro, which our clever title is the App-solute solution for mobile UI testing.
Can you guess who came up with that title?
Not the person that delivers the
Yes, I
mom
can
jokes,
guess.
or the person that delivers the mom jokes.
Exactly, the person who
No,
delivers
I
the
didn't
mom
come up with
jokes.
it. ChatGPT came up with it.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
You could have
All
easily said you did,
and you even
Robin.
admit it.
I could not take credit for a pun that punny.
That's pretty good, actually. All right, Dima, let's start. Just tell us a bit about yourself. What's your original background?
Right. Well, I am coming from Android development background, something I've been doing for, gosh, who knows how many years now, 10-ish, until eventually after hopping between companies, startups mostly, Uber at some point, decided to pick up a role of developer platform engineer, if that makes sense, right? Combination of everything, Android, backend, front end, iOS, you name it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And who else is behind Maestro? I kind of want to know more about the team.
Oh yeah, the team is unique, I would say, in a sense that we are fully distributed across the globe. So we have 7 people, and we have people in Brazil, India, EU, Dubai, United States, from, I would say, stellar teams.
That's quite an international team. Is it hard to work across that many time zones?
We figured it out. I would say it is a bit of a challenge. You need to get used to it, but we do have a decent overlap in time zones, right? So about 2 hours a day, which
That's your
also
go time.
also limits the number of meetings we have, right? Because you
Yeah.
cannot have meetings outside of this time window. So that's convenient in its own way.
It really forces you to like hone your async communication and written communication, which is a good thing.
Absolutely.
It's also good because, based on the countries you just mentioned, I feel like someone is always working on the product. So when Rob and I, when we worked on Mercari, there was a team out in Japan. And when I signed off, or kind of when you signed off, was kind of starting their day.
It was like hand off to Japan and they work all night.
Yeah, hey, can you guys, I need an API call or I need this fixed. They'll fix it. You come in the morning, there's a Slack message, it's ready to go. You implement it and you just keep rolling. There was like no one was really blocked. You were able to just keep moving forward.
Well, let's talk about Maestro. Can you give us like a TLDR? What is it? Why were you inspired to make it? For our listeners who may not know.
Well, now that you mentioned ChatGPT Pan, I wonder if I can outdo it. Maestro is the simplest UI testing framework there is, really. I doubt we can find anything simpler in terms of usability.
Having used it, and I agree.
Yeah, it's not an outlandish claim.
That's not an exaggeration.
Yeah, it takes literally 1 line to install it, and I think, what is it, 3 lines to write the simplest end-to-end test, which is useful.
What was the inspiration behind it?
Inspiration comes from a use case of our product. Like when mobile.dev started, originally we had a completely different product in the very beginning, and it was around measuring performance of applications, and we still do that, to be fair. But when measuring performance, memory leaks, you name it, you need to navigate through your application somehow, right? And the first thing which came to mind, well, we'll just ask our customers to do it themselves. Just write a test, send it to us, we'll run it. And soon enough, we realized 2 things. Either 1, their tests are flaky, they just, don't work in 10% of the cases, which is decent, but when you run it on every pull request, that creates problems.
Yeah.
And 2, that is other potential customers are simply afraid of writing UI tests because they burned, in the past, tried it out. They realized it was flaky and it didn't work for them, and now they don't want to do it again.
Well, it's a lot of time investment for it to not work or be brittle or not effective, and then you have to pivot, and you've just like wasted a bunch of time.
Brittle tests just feel worse than no tests at all,
Yeah.
pretty much. Like it's just so annoying. Like if it's going to fail 2 out of 3 times, which sometimes you get to that point, then it just feels like it's not worth it at all.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be that way, right? Like if I will give you an application, say YouTube, right? Say we're working on YouTube app and we're working on a feature, it's a search feature. And if I ask you to test it, that really is open the app, tap on the search, enter the text, verify something is visible. Now try it with any testing framework out there and you realize that, well, so many things you need to keep in mind, so much setup you need to go through, while, the gap between explaining it to a human being is just so big, right? So that's something we try to replicate with Maestro, this feeling of, okay, just go through the app like a user would.
Mm-hmm.
So we've used Maestro, and this next piece here that I'm going to talk about, we've also been able to use it, but there's been a lot of buzz lately, and I think Leland, who I believe is your partner at mobile.dev, he posted a blog article about Maestro Studio. Can you explain a little bit what Maestro Studio is, and does it work in tandem with Maestro, or is it something separate? How do the two interact together?
You can think of Maestro Studio as sort of lightweight IDE for Maestro itself that allows you to write tests by simply clicking on a device screen. So it runs in your browser and comes prepackaged with Maestro itself. So it's a part of a CLI tool, which then opens in your browser.
You can just run like Maestro Studio.
You don't have to install anything new. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I tried it out on the project we're working on, and it's so cool. It's just like you click around and it'll show you like what you're clicking on, or you can write tests like live just to see like what they do and what works and how to get things to pass. And then just recently, I know you guys released not that long ago a new version, which lets you then like export what you've just created. So it's super slick.
Yeah.
There's same motivation behind it, right? Can we get this tool into hands of everyone doing? Do you really need to be an engineer to write those tests? Can my product manager write it instead, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just going to say. I think Maestro Studio unlocks the potential where a non-developer can come in and build it, export it, and then pretty much send it to the developers, and it can kind of get committed in the code that way. I think also one thing to outline is the output file is in a .yaml. So I think that's something some people might be scared about specifically, but I think it's very simple. Your documentation pretty much outlines how to write each one and makes it easy, and then Maestro Studio just does it for you. That's just pretty cool. Those that don't like YAML, use Maestro Studio.
YAML has pros and cons.
I like it.
It's nice. It's clean.
Yeah.
That's spoken like a true lead engineer.
Pros and cons.
Robin. Pros and cons.
It depends.
Yeah, trade-offs. You can have a very confident wrong answer, or you can get, it depends.
Yeah, we got quite a lot of feedback about YAML specifically, because that's not something people are associating with testing generally, right?
Yeah.
I need to write my test. It is a program which I'm writing, and that's how we've been doing it for 10 plus years now.
Yeah.
So YAML seems like a toy almost, right? But that's a point almost, right? Like when you are using the app, the same YouTube app, let's say, you're not writing a program, you're just tapping on the screen. Do this, do that, that's all, right? Making it complicated is, of course, possible still, even with Maestro, but that's something we're trying to dissuade people from doing in a way. As well as having it in YAML allows us to do quite a lot of optimizations, which would not have been possible with a regular programming language, say JavaScript, because we know in advance how your test will look like. You give us the whole plan. We can look at it. Okay, you after tapping on this, you're going to do something else, right? We can look ahead. We can look back. We can see. We understand your test.
Yeah, which is a lot harder to do when you have something that's more like in JavaScript or something. That's very difficult to do. So one thing I want to do is sort of cast this for our audience, because we, React Native Radio, we have React Native developers. Maestro can be used for React Native or non-React Native. It's just sort of like, any mobile app, including built-in ones, like on your simulator, you can just test, if you wanted to test the settings app or whatever, like you can do it. So that's pretty cool. It's across. Now, I want you to talk a little bit, Dima, about the difference between Maestro and the other end-to-end testing frameworks that are popular among React Native developers. So Appium is sort of like the granddaddy. I don't know. Maybe there's some others that were before it, but it's the one that's been around for a long time. probably one of the ones that was causing you grief.
Probably
Dima,
one of
back
the
in
most
day.
annoying. I think I spent a week
Yeah.
once just setting it up.
Just setting it up. That's the problem. It's like, it's very powerful, but it just has, I don't know, getting the developer experience to the right spot was just very difficult. Then you have Detox, which came out of Wix, which really tried to attempt to fix the problem of flaky tests by knowing what was going on under the hood. So gray box testing rather than black box testing. Black box being like, we don't know what's going on. We're just going to tap around and observe what we see. Gray box is like, Detox is like, okay, we know that there's a network request happening right now. So we're going to wait until that network request returns, and then we'll say, okay, now we're ready to move on. Great idea in theory. And we have had the Detox team on the podcast, and you should listen to that because there's some really great stuff in there. Done some very cool work. But it never quite hit, I think, for a lot of people, the promise of what we really wanted, which was sort of just do your tests, forget about it, and move on. For some apps, it kind of worked that way. But it didn't seem like it worked all the way that way. And the bigger problems a lot of times came up like, okay, we want to test this in a device farm or something like that. And it wouldn't work because it wasn't really designed for that. So hopefully I didn't spoil too much of your answer, Dima, but I'd love to hear... I'd love to hear your perspective on what makes Maestro different, maybe better in some ways than Appium and Detox.
Yes, well, first of all, wanted to give kudos to developers of Appium and Detox because we are building on the shoulders of giants in a way, right? They did have quite a lot of good ideas, some of which we inherited, some of which we redid our way. And I guess I'll start by talking about Appium first and what is different. So you can think of Appium as sort of a translator between your JavaScript code and the actual testing framework under the hood, right? It takes your logic, connects to the device, and then delegates everything to a testing framework. So it does make your tests cross-platform. It does make them sort of fast to compile. And that's great. I think that part works. However, fundamentally, it doesn't change the game, right? It still depends on, say, Espresso under the hood, or UI Automator, or XC UI test, or whatever the underlying mechanism is. Plus, setting it up, a bit of a challenge. And then Detox, I think, tried to fix some of those issues. And whereas they are gray box testing framework, Maestro still is a black box in a way, but they do understand more about the app, right? That's a crucial component. They already ventured into the area of, okay, something needs to change fundamentally about the testing behavior itself, right? It's not enough to just trust, say, Google and Apple to handle that. Unfortunately, it seems that testing has been a second thought for Google and Apple. Yes, framework sort of works. Yes, you can sort of test your applications, so you can sort of use it. But when it comes to answering hard questions, it doesn't handle it quite as well, like network interactions being one, right? So where Maestro is different is that all the brains of test execution actually live in Maestro itself, so on your desktop, not on the device. Maestro tries to trust external frameworks as little as possible, right? Just the bare minimum to get operations like tap on the button, right? Sorry, not even on the button, tap on coordinates, screen coordinates, or input text into a field, or give me a view hierarchy, and that's it. The rest happens within Maestro itself, understanding what view to find, how to find it, then how to recover from a failure, say if tapping fails, and what to do. If element is not found, what to do, like maybe scroll. And that's what makes it fundamentally different.
That makes a lot of sense. It feels like this is going to be the way of the future for integrated or end-to-end integration tests on mobile specifically. This is the first time I've actually wanted to use end-to-end tests. Like, it's faced with the prospect of writing Detox or Appium tests. It's like a chore that you're like, I should do that, but you don't want to. And this is the first time I've ever actually had fun writing tests. And I'm like, okay, this is really cool. Like, I want to add these to my app. So I think this is pretty revolutionary for the space for sure.
I think that end-to-end tests in general, for me, they've always felt like the most bang for your buck if you can get them to work really well. Like, it feels like the amount of effort you put into writing an end-to-end test, you test so many things. Like, everything has to work together in order for it to, function how it's supposed to. And it feels like the most pure test in a way, because at the end of the day, What matters is what the user is tapping on, seeing come up,
Right.
interacting
It doesn't
with.
matter what code is running to make that happen. It matters whether it works.
Exactly. You literally could have a function that returns the wrong result, but somehow gets corrected for later in the system, and the app
But that's
works.
what
right?
your
Like,
unit tests are supposed to catch. Like, that's why you have
unit tests catch that. But at the end of the day, like, does the user care?
No.
They don't. They don't care that something under the hood is, sort of being patched together. They really just care about the end result. And so it feels to me like the most pure type of test. Some developers would probably disagree with me. They feel like, like a function test would be a unit test would be the most pure. But to me, no way. It's all about the user. It's what the user is experiencing.
I think you can have an entire suite of unit tests that are beautifully written and they all pass and your app is still broken.
Yeah.
People often talk about the testing pyramid. You should have a lot of unit tests, then you should have slightly less integration tests, and then end-to-end tests. But reality is you sometimes might flip it around, right? You will only need, say, 5 to 10 end-to-end tests to cover majority of your application, whereas it will take thousands of unit tests to do the same. And even then, by the end of the day, if all your unit tests are green, you're still kind of not sure whether the app is working. You still would like to go through it by hand and test it. Whereas, again, end-to-end test, if it covers it, that's great, right? You have much more. Assuming it is not flaky, of course, because then trust is ruined and you no longer sure if that's just by chance that it worked this time, or maybe that by chance that it failed.
You start ignoring the failures and then your test suite is useless.
Yeah, you're becoming complacent, right?
Yeah, I wonder how much of the testing pyramid stuff is because unit tests are easier to make solid and not flaky. If it was the other way around, where unit tests were more flaky and end-to-end were just super solid, I don't think that anybody would write unit tests. Yeah. It's just about the complexity of writing really, really good end-to-end tests. And I think...
I was going to say, we're simple creatures, Jamon. We get a dopamine hit from a unit test that, you write and it goes red and then it goes green and then it stays green forever. And
half the time I swear developers are just playing Sudoku and getting paid for it. Like that's what they can kind of rationalize this, but it's not really helping. It's like having super, super strict TypeScript. Now I pissed everybody off.
I love super strict TypeScript, by the way. Side note. Anyways, what I was going to say.
You like Sudoku too, right?
I do. And I finished an expert one last night. Anyways, back to what I was going to say. I think, from my experience, I've been, kind of prior to Infinite Red, I spent a lot of time in startups for many years, just kind of bouncing back and forth, getting some up off the ground to get acquired and then move on to the next one, that type of thing. And I hate to say it, but tests and sometimes documentation, fell by the wayside. And to be quite frank, Appium and Detox at the time had a very high bar to get it set up initially. And it most of the time discouraged. But then once, I remember one instance where I allocated time specifically to getting Detox working. I remember just getting it to work where, the app loads, success. And I was like, done. I'll come back tomorrow. And then tomorrow, a whole other storm came up and I never got back to my Detox. But hey, my Detox was still successful because I had that one that loaded the app and it was successful. So I think Maestro is a big game changer and almost magic at this point because it's a quick setup, and using Maestro Studio, which is what I had initially used to get it set up to do one or two things. I think it was a click and then putting in text in an input field. That took me minutes. I wouldn't even go as far as saying hours. I mean, I just talked about Detox taking me a whole day to do one test. I wouldn't even call it end to end. Just to load the app test took me a day, and this took me a couple of minutes, and I got it up and running. So it's just that magic makes it much more valuable and will probably help a lot of people move faster and get that much more coverage on their app. It's great. I mean, yeah, magic.
I want to pivot a little bit to the technical side of Maestro and how it actually works. And Mazen correctly described it as magical, which it is. It feels magical. I want to talk about what are some of the technical challenges that you overcame to make this work and to make a product that has such a simple input and does something so complex as controlling an app. What's going on under the hood? Like, can you explain some of the magic and how you made it all work?
Yeah, ironically, most of Maestro code base is rather simple if you look at it. And of course, yeah, it's coming from a developer, but
it's a relative.
it's moving data structures around. Sure, like here's a view element, here's how to find it, traverse a tree. So that's all built on top of the actual magical source, so to say, which are drivers, as we call them. And driver think of it as a way to communicate with a device. That's not a new idea. We actually took it from Appium as well. Driver tells you what's on the screen. Right now, you can ask driver to tap on the screen. And the beauty of a driver, it is platform agnostic, right? We have a single interface and different implementations for Android, iOS. Might have some special one for React Native at some point, perhaps.
Is that ADB and IDB? Or are those different?
In a way, yes. ADB is, or rather DADB is what we're using for talking to Android device. Mm-hmm. So for those who do not know, DADB is sort of a programmatic access to the same features which ADB, Android Debug Bridge, provides. Whereas IDB is a tool built by Facebook, actually, to replicate some of the same functionality for iOS, which works fairly well, with some little exceptions here and there.
React Native uses IDB a lot, right? Like just for various tooling.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Launching simulators and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, we'll talk about IDB later when it comes to supporting real devices, because spoiler, that's actually the blocker for making that happen. But besides that, possibly the hardest problem to solve for us was to get the view hierarchy from the device. And you'll discover that neither ADB nor IDB can provide a good enough source of data. So what we figured out is, well, those tools don't give that to us. However, XC UI test does, or Espresso on Android does, or UI Tomater does. What if we'll write a test, or rather we'll call it a test, we'll push it to the device and we'll run it. And this test will never return. It will just block forever and will start a server at the same time on the device itself, which allows Maestro to communicate with it and actually pull the UI hierarchy information from the device. So it's sort of unconventional use of testing frameworks, so to speak. And that's where most of magic comes from, because now having this hierarchy in platform agnostic way, we can do anything with it, right? We can traverse it, we can find views in whichever fashion we would like to, we can decide how the framework itself works, so something we couldn't control if, say, we'll just depend on Google's or Apple's work. Or we can surface it in a web page, right? That's where Maestro Studio actually comes in. It just takes a screenshot and takes the hierarchy and draws it on the screen.
It's so cool. It's like, it blows my mind every time. I'm excited to keep using it, and I'm glad you guys were able to figure it out, because I'm enjoying using it.
I kind of want to go back to your spoiler about the devices, but then I have a more specific question. Do you guys foresee adding the physical device support, specifically for hardware stuff like camera specifically?
Having worked with camera in the past, actually several years of my career, is such a hard problem to solve. It works today, it doesn't work tomorrow. It works on this device, but not on that device. And the answer is yes. I mean, of course, we want to add it, and we'll get there as well. So Maestro already supports some physical devices, like on Android, it does work. Camera-specific functionality will add eventually, I'm sure, same as geolocation, mocking, Bluetooth as well, perhaps. A lot of things are possible which you haven't even started exploring. First, we want to polish things out so that it works smoothly for anyone on any machine. We know that Windows users are having a harder time to set it up. Unfortunately, it's not quite as magical yet. So once all those rough edges are addressed, I'm sure we'll tap into more sophisticated problems.
Cool. So basically iOS and Android simulators and then some physical Android devices will work.
That's right.
So I was talking with Leland from your team there, and I've been getting into a lot of AI stuff lately, and as a lot of people have.
ChatGPT.
And ChatGPT and OpenAI and some of the stuff coming out of Google. And there's a lot of really fun, interesting very exciting things kind of coming out right now. And I could envision a world where, you could, instead of writing YAML, you could write plain text, like, just click this, like you could literally write it like you would, talk to someone. How would you write it in English for a manual QA tester? You just type that out and have them do that. And Leland was like, well, we could do that. And we could also just have you just push a button and have it explore your app. And I thought that was pretty cool. So is that something that it would be on the roadmap? Like, 100% automated testing, have it just explore your app and kind of learn on its own what your app does?
Well, that would be a lie to say if I haven't thought about it. But yes, with all seriousness, that is the next step, I think, right? Mm-hmm. As I was mentioning earlier, with YouTube application as an example, mm-hmm. I can describe you how to navigate through the app, and YAML is just one format, of course. You can also do natural language processing and parse that. But ideally, right, if you are a user and I give you an application, YouTube or whatever else, you can probably figure out how to use it without me explaining, as mm-hmm. well as just generally understand if it's broken or not, right, if it is behaving as intended or not. That's a future where I think Maestro is heading, and the testing in general, where apart from manually crafted tests for, the most business critical use cases, you would have some sort of a crawler which goes through your app, understands where can it go, right? What can it do? You just give it a general context. Okay, here's a username and a password, and then the rest you figure out.
Yeah, it might have some guardrails like, hey, don't go delete your account or something. But otherwise, here are some general ideas of what you might want to try to achieve with the app. And it just goes and kind of figures out how to do it, and then reports back if it runs into roadblocks and things like that. It would be kind of interesting, not to get too far afield, but it'd be interesting to even get it to the point where it could detect like human user experience issues. Like it's hard to figure out how to do this. And the AI is mm-hmm. figuring that out. But this is all way down the road. Obviously, right now you're focused on more the programmer interface, the Maestro Studio side of things. All the AI stuff that I'm thinking about is a ways out.
I think, like you mentioned, you're trying to get the basics to work really solidly and consistently. And I think that's smart to sort of build this foundation of trust first and get a lot of buy-in from the developers. And then you'll have that foundation for when you start doing bigger and better.
And for all the listeners out there, as I mentioned, Maestro under the hood, if you exclude the driver, which you never need to touch yourself, it's actually not that complicated to use, right? You can look into source, you can find the Maestro class. It's literally called Maestro class. And it gives you the view hierarchy. It gives you everything is that is on the screen. You can tap on it. You can do whatever you want. And if you just feel like it, maybe you will be the one building it, right? Maybe you'll figure out how to automate it, how to build the AI around that. The tools are there. They're ready to be used. YAML is just like one way to use it, but under the hood, everything is just calling Maestro class.
Well, yeah, YAML is just a way to communicate a bunch of data.
So kind of wrapping up this conversation, Dima, what do you think is next for Maestro and Maestro Studio? Like, what is the grand vision that you guys are trying to get to?
As I was mentioning before, reliability as a whole, I feel, as a former Android engineer, I feel is a second thought for Google and Apple. That's not casting a shade. I think it's just a reality. And we would like to close that gap as a whole, right? Not just testing, but other areas as well. So I want Maestro to become, and Maestro Cloud to become sort of a hub for everything reliability related in your applications. Think screenshot testing or mocking network connections, right? Feature flags, dynamic configuration, performance monitoring, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's a big vision. You all are doing great work, though, and you've been very accessible. We've asked questions. You've been very on top of things when we had any sort of, we had some issues, I think, early with a few things that maybe weren't completely implemented, and you all just released them within a week. It was crazy, how fast you turned some things around for us, which was really cool. One of our biggest apps actually has already moved to Maestro from Detox, and their Detox test suite was kind of just not working. They just didn't run it because it wasn't working. It was very, very difficult to get it running. And they were so happy with Maestro, they switched over to it, and they're in the process of converting all those tests over. So,
and I can even say that an even bigger client that I'm currently on, I'm in the process of prepping a Maestro demo for them, and I'm very excited for it because I think once they see it, I mean, the first meeting we had about testing was, okay, so what's our detox strategy? I was like, let me blow your minds. Let me blow your minds and show you something
Pin in
else.
that.
So they were like, all right, give us a demo and we'll go from there. And I'm very excited because, when I get to it, they're going to realize the amount of time it took me to get to the demo is so much less than the detox roadmap that we had planned. So
I feel kind of bad for the detox folks.
It's not casting any shade. It's just,
Who
there's
do great
different
work.
tools.
It's a different tool.
yeah, it's a hard problem.
It is.
for
It's
one
an
thing.
incredibly
It's
hard
a very
problem.
difficult problem. And as Dima said, like standing on the shoulder of giants, we always have things come out that are based on previous things and kind of build on those. So Dima, you're going to have to go to Wix and convince them to start using Maestro internally. That would be a huge coup. But we do have to wrap up here. It's been fantastic, Dima. I really appreciate having you on. And of course, all the best of luck with Maestro and Maestro Studio. If you'd like to nerd out more about Maestro, you can join our Slack community at community.infinite.red. We have over 2,000 React Native developers in there. There are already some conversations happening about Maestro in that community. Of course, actually, Dima, where can people find, communicate with you all over there at Maestro?
We have a Slack channel dedicated to Maestro as well, with almost 1,000 members. So we can ask questions. We try to reply, or go to GitHub and open an issue. We reply to those as well, but Slack is preferable.
Fantastic. And where can people find the mobile.dev team on Twitter, Dima?
Our handle is mobile__dev. That's 2 underscores.
Perfect. Yeah. More underscores, more fun. You can find Robin, our new lead software engineer at Infinite Red, at Robin_Hines. She only has 1 underscore, but she's still cool. You can find Mazen at Mazen Chami. Neither Mazen nor I have underscores, at Jamon Holmgren. And of course, you can find React Native Radio at React Native RDIO. Thanks so much to our guest, Dima, for joining us today. And as always, thanks to our producer and editor, Todd Worth, our assistant editor and episode release coordinator, Jed Bartosky, our designer, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Derek Greenberg. Thanks to our sponsor, Chain React. Check it out, chainreactconf.com. Hopefully we'll get some folks there, maybe from the Maestro team. That'd be awesome. Special thanks to all of you listening today. Make sure you subscribe on whatever podcasting platform you prefer. Subscribe on all of them. Hey, we like the numbers, right? We're well over 5,000 now. I should actually figure out what the actual number is now. Robin, do you have a mom joke to send us out in style?
I do. This one's courtesy of Gant Laborde, the one and only. How do 37 mathematicians ride a bus with 36 seats? They carry the one.
Oh,
you love them. You know it.
All right. See you all next time.
Bye.